Welcome to a football show. That is Paul Kuharsky. I am Braden Gall. We are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus for the rest of us, the airing of grievances and the feats of strength. Happy Kwanzaa as well, whatever it is that you may celebrate. Hope you're having a good one. Paul, how are you?
Greetings. I am well. Thank you.
If you want to jump into the comment section, please do so. Predemption says 2 more weeks. Just 2 more weeks, and I'm free of two-tone blue insanity. After listening to the Paul Kuharsky podcast following the game against the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday evening, I think there's a lot of folks that agree with Predemption. So I've got a couple of questions for you today, Paul. I want to sort of discuss sort of the holistic view of this toughness, sort of like this story that developed out of the press conference last week and then sort of continued, of course, along with what took place on Sunday. Some of the pieces that have, like, how many players have gotten better under this coaching staff, which leads us to the one major, most important question in the offseason, which is tying the quarterback and the head coach together next year. So we'll get into all of that today on the show. PK, I went into Sinkers today, actually. I've got my 1-year-old nephew running around the house. Shout out to my awesome brother-in-law and his wife, Ben and Kristen, and their nephew, Harvey. They're in town this week. Huge Titans fans, so hope he's doing all right. He's running around, and no, I didn't need to go to Sinkers Beverages for Harvey, but I did need to go to Sinkers Beverages for the family. We're hosting the whole crew this year, and we've got a bunch of people coming in for Christmas Eve. And I went into Sinkers and I said, look, I need something special for after dinner. I need a little something nice. They got the Weller 107 over there. They just got their barrel pick. They got great barrel picks up there. So I picked up a bottle of the 107. My wife said, hey, we need some champagne. So I went and got some champagne for some mimosas and French 75s. Everything we need for the Christmas holiday, I got in one stop at Sinkers Beverages from an award-winning, locally owned business, PK, that helps serve the community for almost 40 years.
What is a French 75?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. It is gin with a little bit of simple syrup, a little bit of lemon, and a little champagne topper. It's quite tasty. As I've gotten older, I've started drinking gin, which is, I don't know what that means. Well, I feel a little bit like an old lady when I drink gin, but it's very tasty. It's aromatic. It's a nice summertime drink. My wife's really into them right now. So we're going to have French 75s as well. I've been drinking gimlets also, which is a weird drink to enjoy, which is just like lime, simple syrup, and gin. It's pretty tasty. I'm getting around on the gin these days. It's not bad.
You're very scattered. Most people, I find, have their drink or two, but you kind of tour the world.
I just, you got to change it up every now and then. like if you keep running the same defense against the same run play, the results aren't going to change. Like, you need to change things up a little bit. Maybe change your fits, change your scheme, change your personnel. I don't know.
Can't change.
Impossible to change. No, but it's great. Sinkers Beverages, great place to go buy all your needs. Great stocking stuffers as well. So if you're last minute gift items, you can always go buy a nice bottle of bourbon, nice bottle of champagne. They got stuff for your bar, right? Mixers and glasses and all kinds of stirring items and utensils and stuff. So all kinds of really good, smart stocking stuffers there for the loved ones that need a cocktail this holiday season. Go check it out. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, best brisket in the city. Make sure you go check them out Wednesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. as well. Lots of you guys in the comments here. Eddie says it's going to be all right. We're getting Rodgers next year. He's kidding, obviously. Ed says Merry Christmas. Predemption, Merry Christmas. Lots of Merry Christmases from everybody out there. So I want to ask you first and foremost, I want to talk about the toughness thing, sort of not about any one particular angle of it, but it felt like it's a story that has built on itself over the course of the last week or so. First of all, you and I have not spoken since Callahan sort of, I guess he went on a rant. He was rather controlled, almost one might say scripted for a rant, for an emotional rant. It felt like a few of those lines were something he had been thinking about or written down or some sort like that. That's purely speculation on my part. But he goes on that, he gets accused of that, and then he goes on the rant, dropping a bunch of cuss words to make a point. And that's not really that big of a story to me. I think you wrote that as much in your column. It's not that big of a story until they give up the most rushing yards in franchise history as the Titans. And you hear stories from the opposing team saying, well, I heard them talking. They knew Taylor was going to go off this week. That's all alleged in sort of a secondhand comment. Does the story get bigger in your mind because of what's happened on the field and where they are in the middle of their season or at the end of their season, does it change what Callahan said last week?
Well, I mean, I think it's just more symbolism, if you will, of everything going wrong, right? They had a little bit of a rise there that culminated with the win in Houston, but everything's gone bad since then, and it's the whole season's crap. And so you have a spirited discussion, say, about the team's toughness. I thought for me, the conversation was more about mental toughness than physical toughness. This is all spurred by really, maybe there were some rumblings about this, but it's all spurred really by Mike Herndon putting it into print at paulkuharsky.com. Easton Freeze asks a question about it. I didn't think the answer was necessarily scripted, but I thought it was performative. They gave him a chance to kind of get angry and stand up for his guys, and their response to him standing up for them is a mentally and physically soft defensive performance in Indianapolis. And then, I thought guys were casual about it after the game. Really, I don't know if you have those 3 clips, but this works well to set up one of them, where I thought guys after the game were kind of like, well, it's just gap stuff, and a couple fits. And, it's 11 people, Simmons says, kind of to indicate, well, not this one of the 11, but the other 10 of the 11. And other people saying, well, it didn't happen so much when I was on the field, but when other people weren't on the field. And T'Vondre Sweat telling Nick Suss, you got to watch the film, as if the film's going to have some mystical revelation of how it somehow wasn't that bad. Instead of guys raising their hand and saying, that was crap. Like, that's unacceptable crap. And we sucked today. And we've sucked a lot of the season. And I just, and even Callahan, in his answer to me that I think will play here, says, well, it's 3 big runs. And when you give up 3 big runs, the number's going to be big. It's kind of explaining it away in a way, to me, that's lacks accountability.
Yeah, I thought the players as well. So again, I don't think in any one situation, I don't think any one of the things is overly alarming, or like, again, it's a bad season on a bad team and they're at the end of a bad run here. And I get all of that. Any one thing doesn't really raise my interest. It did feel like Callahan was, to your point, scripted isn't the right word. Maybe performative is the right word. It was that he was prepared for this type of thing and looking for a chance to say what he needed to say, which is very normal for coaches on every level. But again, if you're going to go out on the limb and do all of that, which is totally fine, that is a message to your team that you have their back. That's what that is. That's not a message to anybody else. It's a message to your players. And for them to respond the way they did is a concerning thing for me. It's all of it together. So here was Callahan today, and I believe this is.
So I said, do you have any concern that these guys all kind of collectively minimized it?
I didn't see any of that, Paul. To be honest, I didn't watch it. I didn't see any of the player interviews or anything like that. But I don't sense that from our players. What they say after games, and sometimes there's emotion involved in it. Don't feel like that is indicative of what I experience when I interact with them. Certainly, I'm as embarrassed as anybody that was what we put on the field, and I think they are too. That it's not obviously anywhere close to acceptable performance in the run game. I don't really know how they personally felt about every part of it, but collectively, we had to play better in the run game than we did, and we didn't do enough things right, and that's how you get run for the amount of yards we got run on. So again, I can't comment on what they said after the game, but I just know that I would hope that they feel just as embarrassed as I do, that that's a performance that we can't put out there.
I mean, there you go, Paul. I mean, I don't disagree with anything he's saying there, but not a lot of answers either.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's just they make it sound like it's Jeff Simmons said stopping the run's easy. So, and part of his conversation after that game, he says stopping the run easy. And the other thing is Arden Key said, we didn't adjust. We didn't adjust. I said, well, were there conversations on the sideline about how to adjust? Are you capable of adjusting? Do you know how to adjust? And he said, we didn't adjust. I said, why? He said, that's a coach's question. And I think the other clip we have here kind of sets up to that. I took it back to Callahan and I said, yeah, at least one guy said it was an adjustment thing and you didn't adjust. Are you capable of adjusting?
Here was Callahan's response.
I thought they, we tried a bunch of different things, we were playing some man coverage against some of that RPO stuff, which you have to do against quarterback run game. We pressured it quite a bit. We played some middle field open. We sort of rolled through a bunch of different things to try to slow some of it down, and some of it worked pretty good. And again, it's the explosive runs that got out that made it look way worse. But yeah, I thought Denard did a good job trying to mix it up and change the look. So again, I can't speak to that necessarily if that's what they felt like. My door's open if they want to come express those things.
Didn't make it look way worse. It was terrible. So I've always had trouble with Mondays. I go back to Jeff Legwald, who works at ESPN for a long time now, who was my original teammate at the Tennessean, and he always joked about how much trouble I had with Mondays, where people put a spin on it. But like those 3 runs didn't make it look worse. Those 3 runs helped make it be really bad, really bad. They didn't make it look something. They were it. It wasn't like it was this, and then those 3 runs did something to it. Those 3 runs were very much part of it. And those 3 runs were 160 yards. So that's
half. That's half of it.
Yeah. Well, the other half of it was also crap.
Right. The Arden
it was also a bad. If they only gave up half of it, it was a bad run defense day.
Like I know that there's a balance for players and coaches to sort of not give away whatever secrets they think they're keeping from folks, like using terminology or a strategy against a certain look or what. Like I know that they're like everyone's sort of like a paranoid schizophrenic about saying that kind of stuff out loud. But to be asked like, what adjustments did you make? And to say like, I don't know, you'll have to ask the coaches. Like that doesn't speak well for anyone involved. None of this is a good look, of course. Now, here's a question for you about Denard Wilson. If I were to ask you to date, there's obviously a couple games left. If I were to ask you to date, what are the 2 defining sort of moments or games that you think gave you the most information about Denard Wilson? And it's hard not to look at the Commanders game and this game and say in a negative way, they got pushed around, were unprepared, and had no answers. And in this case, a quarterback who is not particularly good at throwing the football. So am I wrong on that to think, and I'm not trying to like dog on Denard Wilson here, but like if I think about the defense, the defining moments of the season might be what we just saw and against the Commanders where they couldn't stop air.
Well, I think to expand on that, the same gap run trouble against Washington, all right? They couldn't figure it out during the game, but you would think the Monday after that game, you have some serious conversations about it. If we see this again, here's what we did wrong, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get to this week, last week, preparing for it again, and you have to harken back to Washington. This is going to be similar to what we saw against the Commanders. Reminder, here's some Commanders clips. This is what we did wrong. This is what we can't see. These are the gaps we have to fit. This is the integrity we have to have, all of that stuff. Then when you go out and you do it again and you do it worse, that to me is a Denard Wilson problem. And we'll certainly have that conversation on Thursday, which, it's crappy timing to bang the guy over the head the day after Christmas.
Yeah.
At least it's not the day before Christmas.
Right. Eddie says there needs to be a Denard conversation. I'm not calling for his job, but the fanboys on Twitter need to calm down. I think that's the right approach to this. And I think, frankly, it's the right approach to all of these guys. And again, I was going to ask you about sort of players that you think have shown improvement or progress and guys that you think have earned themselves. I think Cedric Gray at least gave the fans something to build on, at least, if nothing else. But if I asked you about the defense and I say, who has definitively shown improvement, gotten better, who has flourished because Denard Wilson is the coordinator, and like Harold Landry, nice season, nothing special, not better than he's been. Arden Key, okay, looks like
Arden Key's been better than he's been.
I think that's fair, but he's still kind of just like Brian Callahan said in the beginning of the season, which is like a situationally good pass rusher. Jeffrey Simmons, I would say, has not taken a step forward in his career this year. T'Vondre Sweat's been very good for a rookie. There's no question about that for the most part. I think Amani Hooker's had a very good season. He had a couple of missed tackles yesterday, but he's had a pretty good overall season. And if he's paired with a very dynamic safety in the future, I think he can be. I think he's one of the only names I can think of that has definitively gotten better throughout the course of this year. And he's a guy who's been around a long time. So who's the answer to that?
I think they've done it on the back end, right? With the injuries that they've had on the back end, to get Daryl Baker to perform as he has with as many snaps as he's played. I think that's been a win. I think Daryl Worley off the street, who's a guy that had tryouts here that they passed on him at one point in Jacksonville and San Francisco. He's come in. He's not ideal, but he's playing after Diggs went down. And after they decided Mike Brown wasn't the guy, I think he's done an admirable job back there. So I think at corner and safety, you've gotten pretty good performances out of a good variation of guys. Jarvis Brownlee, is one of the bright spots on the team.
Yeah.
I'd say inside linebackers, you can't say the same about. Generally, it's been inconsistent there. Who else? I think Lynch and Coburn, we haven't talked about a lot, have been, and I'll hand this off to Blake Bedingfield. He's like those guys really early and has mentioned them multiple times on Mondays in his post-game scouting reviews at paulkuharsky.com, saying, beyond expectations, that he's thought they've given them some good snaps behind there at a spot where it looked like the depth was going to be really shaky. And Sebastian Joseph Day's been a pretty good player. But, I think they get trapped with Simmons and Sweat off the field too much. I think yesterday I called them out. They had like a 9-play series on offense, or 8 plays plus a break between first and second quarter. And then Simmons couldn't get on the field. Now, he might have been trapped off the field because they went no huddle or whatever. But then, you got to anticipate some things like that are possible. Have him on the field for the first down at the beginning of that long rest, so that he's not off the field for 4 snaps there. I think they've done a poor job of meeting out the rest for Simmons in particular. He's been off the field in some key situations where other teams have managed to move the ball. And I blame that. I mean, position coaches generally take care of that. So I think that's a fault with Tracy Rocker. They've got to get him rest somewhere, but I don't think they've chosen their spots great in some games. But defensively, some of those key guys, Simmons got better. He was good for a while. I think he really has gotten handled by the Colts in 2 games. And
that's not a new thing. That's not a new thing either, by the way. There's been some moments where Taylor's had big time games against this team,
and lesser backs when Taylor's been hurt. And they also and Landry has been
Zach Moss last year, right?
Yeah, Landry's gotten some sacks, but independent of those sacks, and none of those sacks. A sack's a sack, but they've not been high grade sacks. He's been a very quiet player this year who looks really like he's on the back end, sadly. Yeah. So they've got some issues over there and some spots to fill.
Poor Johnny, I think, hits it here. Like, it started with everyone freaking out about special teams, then the offense, and now the defense. Yeah, that's kind of the whole team. I'm curious about, because I actually don't. I tend to agree with Eddie on this, and in general, I agree with patience and investment in people in general, whether it's a player or a coach or a front office person. It doesn't mean it's going to work. Doesn't mean they're going to get better, but I think you got to give them time to figure out who they are, answer questions, collect data, etc. It feels like if you're going to come up with any of the most important ways to evaluate a defense, whether it's points allowed, yards allowed, red zone stops, third down stops, takeaways, pressuring the quarterback, you name it, they haven't really hit those marks. The follow-up to that context, of course, is that Denard Wilson wants to run a certain type of man coverage scheme where he rolls up and plays press and is aggressive. And they've had a lot of moving parts. You bring in Ernest Jones late. You bring in Jamal Adams late. They both are gone pretty quickly. Diggs gets hurt. Linebackers are very lacking in talent and now injured, and now you're deep onto the depth chart. Like, I understand Awuzie and Snead. Like, I understand that Wilson hasn't been playing with a full deck for most of the season, but they have no identity. And there is no statistical thing you can point to that says this is what they do really well. And then we answer the development question, and there's not a lot of development either. So again, at what point is this on the staff and the players, and at what point is this a product of the unfortunate situation that they've been put in? I don't know.
Also, not a lot of leadership. I mean, it's some of everything. So, poorly constructed, then hurt, and then not productive. So, there's a coach. Yeah, really. Yeah, get the clean sweep. Not well put together, not performing well, and not a lot of hope. Somebody saying Daryl Baker there. If I gave him a wrong first name there, my bad. I think I said Daryl Baker.
I thought you said
not Jerome Baker.
I think he's saying some of the names that have shown improvement. We'll get to the offense in just a second.
Daryl Baker's been good. Look, the one spot you could still feel good about them at next year is corner. With L'Jarius Sneed coming back, Woozy, has lost a step, but still brings something to the table. Brownlee is as much on the rise as anybody on the roster, certainly on the defensive side of the roster. Baker and McCreary, I mean, that's 5 pretty good players there, presuming that Sneed returns to form. And I'm going to presume that Sneed returns to form or something close to form.
If you're selling Wilson and you're selling yourself on growth and hope for the next year, that is where you start. Hey, this identity is supposed to be predicated on good cornerback play. They went out and invested in the position. It feels like they invested smartly, injuries notwithstanding. They have a good starting number 1, a solid number 2. They developed McCreary. You get Jarvis Brownlee in the draft, and then you find Baker. Okay. And the argument, glass half full or a quarter full or a tenth full, whatever you want to call it, is that they will be as strong at any position. They'll be stronger there than anywhere else, and that allows Wilson to implement his identity. That's the argument, but that's all you got.
Yeah,
that's all you got.
Plus, I think we discussed this early on, and it was one of my concerns. You can't build back to front in the NFL because nobody really rolls a defense out there and says, we're going to cover long enough to give our guys time to get to the quarterback. It doesn't work that way. So that's a good group of corners, and Hooker is good. You need another safety there for sure, but you got to get to the quarterback. And this group hasn't rushed the quarterback, and the blitzing stuff that we thought was going to kind of fill in the cracks, they haven't brought. Murray, we thought would blitz, and we haven't really seen him, and now he's dinged up. Secondary guys, we've seen blitz, but sparingly. The blitz element hasn't been a feature of this defense, I don't feel like.
Nope.
And without it, they've just been kind of resolved that they're not going to get the pass pressure that they need to force the issue with an offense. And without that, no defense is going to really be much. And so it seems to me they're just counting on waiting to get some players who can force the action up there.
Yeah. Eddie says here, and this is an interesting question. Eddie says, team never quit yesterday, down 4 scores. They came back. I'll give him that. Game was over at halftime, but they didn't take the second half off.
I don't care. If you take the first half off, then how much credit do you get for not taking the second half off?
Look, at this stage of the season, PK, after this thing is unfolded the way it is, I don't take anything for granted. So, look, and this is more important. On a week where I have, for the first time, because I agree with you, I don't think anyone in the NFL is soft physically. Like, I just don't think that's a thing almost kind of writ large across the board. It's hard to get to the NFL and be soft physically, not tough or hardworking or physical. But I do think there's, at this time of year, you find out who the guys who play the game to be a champion and the guys who play the game to get paid are. That's what happens on a team in this situation. And I think it's interesting that, again, in light of the conversation we've been having, or I think has been having around the team from a softness or toughness or mental toughness standpoint, to at least see them fight, I think matters to the fans. Maybe I'm with you. It doesn't matter. Like 38-7 is 38-7. Like you're getting your ass kicked either way.
I mean, I think Mike Vrabel thought that his team not giving up on him and fighting to the end in a 6-win season in 2023 was going to mean something for him, and it did not. Now, I'm not saying that means Brian Callahan's getting fired, but he's got half as many wins as that, and his team's fighting back from 38-7 down.
Yeah.
If it didn't mean much in the first instance, The only reason it means much in the second instance is because the guy's in his first year.
We still have some Skoronski here, I think, for everybody. We'll talk a little offense as well. I think there's a quarterback conversation as well as I think we've moved on to the next biggest question about this franchise, and I'll explain in just a second. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinkers Beverages, two great local amazing sponsors. Go support local business, okay? Just people that live in this community and function in this community, create jobs in this community, that keep the dollars in the community. When you go shop at Sinkers Beverages, you are shopping with a business and that employs a bunch of locals who live and work here in our community, in our neighborhood, that have been working for the neighborhood and the community for a long time. Nashville has been built on that for a long time. So please go support good small businesses, local businesses. Sinkers Beverages, 40 years of providing award-winning, by the way, 4 straight Liquor Store of the Year championships in East Nashville. Of course, their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages, up in Hendersonville. You can go visit each one of those stores and search Uber Eats for Sinkers Beverages, and they will deliver that booze directly to your house. So you can drink, they will drive. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, you guys know the drill. Best brisket in the city. I got some smoked turkey to have at the house for a couple of days here because I want to go back to making turkey sandwiches because Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday, and I know it's Christmas time, but I prefer Thanksgiving. So I wanted to have some cold turkey sandwiches. So go buy some. If you that's how you can do it. You can go up there and buy sides and eat a meal, or you could just buy some meat and bring it home and have it at your house. So there you go. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinkers Beverages. You want to set up the Skoronski audio before we get to more
Let's
questions?
go here for a second to this Eddie comment. He says, I care. He's talking about guys fighting back. It means the coaching staff hasn't lost the locker room. But
are we sure?
Well, what about the first half where the locker room didn't do anything for the coaching staff? The locker room didn't back up the we are physical stuff. The locker room didn't execute. The offense executed a pretty good game plan, actually, but threw one really stupid and bad interception. But the defense, like we just talked about, didn't learn anything from the Commanders game. Didn't stop the bleeding, didn't adjust, all of that stuff. So, I mean, you're giving them a better scenario because they fought back from a big deficit. You kind of like granting them permission to have the big deficit, and they win you over by their feisty comeback. Well, what if they played well from the beginning and they didn't have to make a feisty comeback? That's a better scenario that doesn't impress you that way.
Well, and to your point, it's honestly like, had Brian Callahan not gone out of his way to be a different version of himself in a press conference about this issue, it would not have occurred to me to ask the question about like, oh, has the locker room been lost, or are they mentally tough, or those are very hard things to prove. The only way you can prove those things is with results. And this is the worst result we've ever seen from a physicality standpoint, going on the road to a division opponent and giving up a record number of yards in Titans football history. So if that had not happened, it would just be a bad day. We would just say, oh, Sunday was terrible. It was the worst defensive performance ever. Rookie linebackers in there, so-and-so, and context, whatever. But when you have a quote from another player saying, oh, they kind of felt it was coming, and then the response to your coach getting your back publicly is to then go out and do the worst job you've done all year, it highlights the whole thing. That's the concern, Eddie. I think he knows that, but that would be my.
I'll ask this too, and maybe this is what I'll write tomorrow. Now, is it good that the locker room's not lost? Wouldn't it be better if they had a strong-willed guy who said, "You know what? This is bullshit, man. This is exactly what we did against Washington, and here we are doing the same thing worse against Indianapolis. Why? We should all be asking why."
Well, okay. Is your question that
is that a terrible locker room fracturing thing, or is that a player who's got some gumption and would have enough good standing, like Delaney Walker might be saying that, because Delaney Walker has enough stripes that he wouldn't be putting his career in jeopardy to ask a question that everybody wants to know the answer to? Would that be a better scenario for the Titans? I think it might. What this is a bunch of soldiers who zip their lip and go about their business to collect their contracts and say the same BS every week to just maintain the status quo, thinking that that's the easiest way. But the status quo is bad, man. It's bad.
Ed says Rudolph and Spears have been great against prevent defenses the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I agree. No, so I don't think I think your question is interesting because I don't think I think losing the locker room relative to the coach's message running out or being stale or not landing is different than not having a leader that is willing to put their own neck on the line. I think those things, I see how you think they're not think. I see how you make the case that they're related. I think they can be, but it feels like they just don't have the alpha. And Jeffrey Simmons has been painted as the alpha forever, and they don't have like the real alpha on that side of the ball that can, Ernest Jones is the closest thing this team has had to that all year on defense.
Agree. They missed that. I understand why they traded it for a fourth, but in exchange for that fourth, you hurt.
Yep. Yep. All right. We want to set up, we'll talk a little offense here. Do you want to set up here for me?
I just thought this was interesting. And this is part of what Mike Herndon used when he was raising the softness issue in his column last week. He used the Brownlee thing about the cold in Washington, not where Brownlee said I was cold, where Brownlee said we didn't react well to the cold, and I'll say it, other guys won't, which is illustrative of some softness, I think. And he used a quote that I had a video of from Peter Skoronski. I believe the date was October 23rd, when he said, when we reach the inflection point, we generally don't respond to it well, and we don't recover from it well. Yesterday, he said this, which is not far off from that quote that's 2 months old, which does not show growth, which does not show resiliency and relentlessness.
Seems like we live and die with little mistakes, and we let sort of one thing kill us. It takes forever to get out of it. I think we just gotta mature as a group, individually and as a group, to kind of push through the little things that go wrong and keep going. But it seems like every little thing that happens, all right, it turns into a mudslide. Did you guys feel?
Mudslide. So resilience and relentless are the two words that are up on the meeting room wall. Those are the two words that are in these guys' heads all the time. Have we seen them? No. It's a mudslide.
I think it takes two, it does. Okay. So the first two sentences he said there, to me, that is, sometimes it might be immaturity. And I don't think Peter Skoronski, he's only a second-year player. I don't think it's immaturity for him. Maybe for some of the players, you can make that excuse, whether it's Tavondre Sweat or some of the rookies, whatever. But honestly, if you're talking about veteran players that allow a single mistake to, like, the whole game of football, and really any sport, Paul, like, what makes great coaches great is removing the human element from your gameplay, which is you're a human being. You make a mistake. Everyone wears it differently. You're a human being. You do something great. You wear it differently. The key to great coaching and great athletes is to completely eliminate it. Be a goldfish, right? Is to completely eliminate it and go back to doing. And this is, I know you don't like Saban, but like Saban's genius at college with college athletes, because kids are far more volatile than adults in the professional ranks, is to make it about competing against your own best version of yourself. And that is what the NFL does for everyone. Your job is to be the best version of yourself on every single rep, no matter what. And that's it. It doesn't matter what happens in your personal life. Doesn't matter what's happening in your community. Doesn't matter what you did on the last play. Doesn't matter what you're going to do on the next play. And if you're telling me Peter Skoronski's saying that one little mistake can ruin our focus or our game plan, and that it takes us too long to get out of that is a damning indictment of where this team is at mentally. And it's hard to quantify that stuff normally. That's a really big statement, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's 2 months old, like I said. So,
Right.
What? We got 8-9 games worth of that being not changing, which is really, really bad. I think Peter, in that regard, has his finger on the pulse of the team. And we're talking about lack of leadership. I don't, he's not in a great position to be a leader, and he's still growing in that regard. But there's a guy that understands what's going on, I think, as well as everybody. So he's having trouble helping solve it, but he understands what needs to be solved.
Yeah, no question about it. Sam says, ask this in the post-game chat, PK, but doesn't that speak more than anything to the lack of leadership in the huddle, which is a little different, but kind of the same question. The quarterback's got to pull you out of that, but ours is the catalyst 99% of the time. I think there's something to that to some
Yeah.
degree. Like,
No, there's something to that. I mean, you want your quarterback to come in the huddle at the beginning of a series after bad shit's happened and to crack the joke or say the tough thing that gets everybody locked in and reset and ready to go. And it's hard to be that guy when you have the collective numbers that Levis and Rudolph have, which are pretty much identical now. And the big disease is, and Nick Suss has flushed this out very well. We know how good he is with numbers. I mean, they've thrown a bucket load of interceptions within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, which is where things are supposed to be pretty easy. I mean, at least Levis used to throw the picks down the field,
right.
you know, which are more punt-like. The more punt-like your interceptions are, the better they are. If you're throwing pick sixes, to a sinking linebacker that you quote unquote don't see, that's a problem. And Mason's, one of them was off Pollard's hands and the other one was at the end of the game. You don't wipe those clean, but they don't count the same. The bad interception yesterday was a really bad interception.
Yeah. Well, and like an interception on 3rd and 16 from your own 44, where you throw the ball down the field and they get the ball on their own 18-yard line. Like, that's just a punt, and that's not really a turnover, honestly, because you're about to punt on the next play anyway. So there's plenty of interceptions that function that way. And then there's too many of them from Levis in particular and Rudolph against even just 2 weeks ago at home, where the ball is going the other direction into the end zone. You can't have that. Jason says lots of whistling past the graveyard, and they might not have even hit the floor yet. That might come in the last game of the season. Ed says, are we all jaded because Vrabel seemed to be the exact opposite of what we are seeing now? Focus and attention to detail. I think you were asked that yesterday on your show as well.
Yeah. I mean, look, we've, there was a good Twitter chain out. Somebody put it out. I should have given them credit 2 weeks ago about, this is for everybody that thinks, this would never have happened under Vrabel, with chronicling, the bad losses under Vrabel. And over the last 2 years, there were a good share of them where the Titans played like crap, and lost some really ugly games. And the common thread there through those 2 seasons and this one, and you could say what you want about Callahan's ability to coach or not to coach, but there's a lack of talent on the roster. I thought this roster was going to be substantially better. And maybe the coach's inability to develop these guys or get them into good position, or the continued lack of injury luck, are all factors there. But Vrabel's team had a feel of better attention to detail. They wouldn't lose games. I don't think they'd lose 2 games in a month with the same gap fit problems.
Yeah. I got one more question about Callahan and the quarterback, and we'll get to that. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Please check it out. PaulKuharsky.com is the website, of course, so you can go sign up there. Again, all 3 good local small businesses. Go support good local small businesses here in Nashville. They do the good work. Adam says draft Diego Pavia. If he can turn around 2 in Vandy, you can turn around anything. Only kind of kidding. First of all, I have stood next to Diego Pavia, and he is 5'8" max. He is a great story and a fun player. He's not an NFL quarterback, and I think he just won an appeal, like with the Supreme Court or something like that, to get an extra year of eligibility, I believe, at Vanderbilt.
It didn't go as high as the Supreme Court, but
it went pretty high. a court, Paul, a large court with important people wearing robes that think they're better than everybody else. So here's my thing about the quarterback, and I know we talked about this. Nick Suss mentioned a bunch of these names on Thursday's episode. I know you talked about Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins on your episode. That is going to be the next major conversation, of course, or it's already the major conversation, which is sort of working through the options. And I've always believed that Levis or veteran is the number one reason you do that, is to build a team that is going to be better and more equipped to create success for whoever it is you eventually find to be the quarterback, whether that's a draft pick or a young player you trade for or a veteran free agent. And that's sort of how I always viewed it, and just kind of stopped right there. I think to the point about Vrabel's teams clearly having attention to detail and identity more than anything else, the first and most important question about this organization and this collection of minds running things was always about finding out about Will Levis, right? The number one question on this team was, we've got to find out about Will Levis. By the end of the year, we need to know what he is as best we can. It seems like, for better or for worse, they found out that answer. I do think that if you work down your progressions into the very next most important question, it is you've got to learn about Brian Callahan. Next year, you've got to find out if Brian Callahan is the answer or not. I don't think you should fire him this year. It's possible. Amy has been known to react in the moment. Rand Carthon, I don't know. We don't have a long enough track record to know whether or not he is a shrewd businessman or flying by the seat of his pants. We just don't know. But I think learning what Brian Callahan is probably your top question for next year as an organization. And you cannot do that with a rookie quarterback, in my opinion. Now, if everything's great, Shedeur Sanders is great, or Cam Ward is great, or whoever they decide, if that's the direction they go, they draft a player, maybe you find out that he's good. But I don't know if you know definitively if he's not. If you go get a veteran quarterback who should be a professional, who knows how to at least read defenses and throw accurate passes and run the offense that Brian Callahan probably wants this person to run, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford, Sam Darnold, fill in the blank, I don't think it applies to the lower level guys like the Trey Lances and the Zach Wilsons of the world. I don't think those guys give you an answer on Callahan. If the next most important question is find out about Brian Callahan, if he's the right answer, then you've got to get a guy who can actually execute the offense, and then you can figure out, oh, it's the offense, it's the scheme, it's the quarterback, it's the offensive line. Then you can find out about the coach. Am I wrong to prioritize that for next year?
I agree with all of that, but that's not my rationale for wanting a veteran quarterback. My rationale for wanting a veteran quarterback is that I don't think these rookies are worth the capital that needs to be invested in getting one. And they've got these needs that we keep ticking off: edge rusher in particular, right tackle in particular, dynamic wide receiver in particular. You've only got 2 picks in the top 3 rounds to address those things, plus free agency, plus a lot of secondary stuff, safety, tight end, right guard, that you've got to address. And in order to address all of that, I don't think you could be rallying too many draft capital things for a quarterback that's not on the north of 50% odds for a quarterback. Plus, I think they're reasonably good selections in the free agent market that are only going to cost you money once these things sift out. So if you could get Derek Carr and address all of those things, that's better. But here are 2 things that factor in. One, it's very disappointing that you go into year 2 and you need Brian Callahan to prove himself. You needed to make a hire that was, going to be going into year 2, growing the program, that you didn't have a bunch of question marks about. So that year 2, and I don't think you're wrong, is about Brian Callahan proving himself as a massive disappointment. And whether he turns out to be a good hire or not, and I think there's still a possibility of that, though most fans would disagree, that's a failed hire to a degree. You needed more out of your hire in the first year.
Is
in
that
terms
not
of proof of concept?
Is that not okay? I agree with you. I agree with your point on Rand and Amy and Chad deciding on Brian Callahan, right? But if Levis is like, I guess I'm being conservative here and giving him a pass on the Levis experiment being as bad as it was, to have the interceptions and the turnovers and the lack of, if it's as bad as we kind of all think it is that really a fair shake for him? Is that really a fair? I agree with you. In theory, you'd love to know that in year 1, but is that on him?
Well, they lost yesterday, not because of their quarterback play, but because they couldn't stop the run. So that's his chief lieutenant, who's head coach of defense, being poor. Now, that's under his purview as well. Maybe a Rand Carthon nudge to hire, but that's all him, all him. So I say that. The other thing, I forgot where it's going with the other thing there. So it'll come back.
I first of all, and this goes to the
the other thing, Blake Benefield pointed this out. And look, I understand the Titans are not an attractive place right now for a replacement for Callahan, say, if they made the semi-rash move of replacing him. Blake says all of these quarterbacks that we're talking about, a Cousins or a Carr, if they have the freedom to go where they want, they're all in their last act. Sure, money's going to sway them, but ultimately they want to go somewhere where they're going to be able to win. And this is not a place that they're going to look at and say, oh, I could go to Tennessee, and with a couple finishing touches, we're going to be able to win. And so the Titans are going to need things to sift out in a very favorable fashion and make the most attractive offer in order to lure one of these guys. And so, I need to factor that into my thinking more than I do. There are plenty of teams that need a quarterback.
Yep.
And most of those teams, because the Titans are fourth in the draft order right now, are closer to giving a guy a chance at one last hurrah than Tennessee is.
I do think, like, if you're Derek Carr, who's got a relationship with Brian Callahan, and maybe you can go be a backup somewhere, or you can be a starter in Tennessee, when you can sell him on, look, we got an offensive line that's very young and talented. We got some pieces on offense around him. Look, we got a top flight draft pick. We're going to add a pass rusher. I could see the argument there. If a guy, like, that's why I think Derek Carr might be the most interesting name of the group, because I don't think he's not too good, which is not what you want, but like, he's just like Cousins. I actually don't know if he might actually be washed. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure about him. He wasn't much better with the football this year, but he's more talented on the whole than all these other guys. But Derek Carr is one of those guys that I think is a kind of a consummate adult professional. You know what you're going to get with him off the field and in the huddle and on the locker room. He comes in and he sort of, Brian Callahan can say, look, I need you to execute my offense. Here's the vision. He could come in and show you that, and then you could get definitive answers on everybody. And again, the sales pitch is, we're still going to give you a chance to play starting quarterback.
Yeah, here's the thing, though. Put up Sam's comment there. He's kind of saying, laugh out loud. They'll have markets, but does not pretend major contenders are going to be looking at Cousins, Carr, Field. Here's the thing, though. They're going to be 9 new coaches probably in the NFL, 8, 7, whatever. Yeah. Those coaches come in, and like Callahan last year, they could say, hey, come in, help me set the culture and start this thing, right? And there's a certain attractiveness to that, as opposed to in your second year saying, hey, this thing went to shit my first year. I need you to come in and help me with this 3-year contract, go from here. But if it doesn't go well, I'm going to get fired. And then who knows what you're left with? You're going to have to start from zero with some new guy. There's a lot more safety in the first scenario where you're in the first year with the guy and you probably have a 2 or 3 year hook with him than with me, where if it doesn't go well, I'm gone.
But okay, 9 coaching changes. Like, who are the 9 that you like? Just give me a ballpark of the name. Like, first of all, Chicago and the Jets. There's a chance that, definitely not trading Caleb Williams and Aaron Rodgers is probably back. The Giants, if they were to make a move, right, would have
Aaron Rodgers is back. But
okay, all right. Maybe the Giants, maybe the Jets with Vrabel is a place where they can go to somebody and say, "Come on in and build a new culture."
Raiders, I think, are changing course.
They're not going to go back to Carr. They just got rid of him.
No,
right?
But they'd be in the market for the other ones, or they're going to draft one at the top. So if we say those 3 free agent quarterbacks plus the 2 rookies, they're 5 quarterbacks. Well, let's give them 5 jobs. I need standings in front of me to have the teams. Who else is at the top of the draft here? Jacksonville's not changing direction at quarterback, probably.
No.
Who else is up there? Help me out. You got standings in front of me?
The Giants is the only one. The Giants and
Giants
the Raiders
are drafting Sanders, I would think.
Right. And the Raiders need somebody, but they're not going to go back to Carr. My point
Indianapolis is changing quarterback, I think. Absolutely.
Do you think they're done on Richardson already?
Absolutely. They should be. Shouldn't they?
I think Richardson deserves. He's too talented to. They're 7 wins right now.
He should be, not because of him.
No, I know.
He should be in a competition situation at the very least. So I think those guys would be in play at a place like that.
My point is that this might be a lucky situation for the Titans in that a lot of the new coaches stepping in might already have some answers at that position.
New Orleans is, if Carr's out, somebody's got to be coming in. Are they going with Spencer Rattler full time?
To me, that's a rookie. That's a rookie draft pick. A new coach picks a rookie quarterback. That's what that one feels like to me. But again, we're just kind of spitballing here. So.
Let me see here. I got, let's go a couple more.
Yeah, what else?
Rams could conceivably be moving on. 49ers could conceivably be moving on, but that would put Purdy in the marketplace. Raiders we covered. Colts we covered.
If Carr is
Browns could be doing something that would maybe be draft. Fields could be coming to market. Jets, I think, are doing something. Patriots are fine. Dolphins are fine. Bills are fine. So
go back to the
think
Browns for a
it's
second. Let's go to the Browns for a second, because I think that's one that might hit the sweet spot here.
But if Winston comes out, there's one out, one in.
Sure, but my point is that they have a lot of really good pieces, a team that could try to win now with a coach who's got an offensive track record, who knows what he's doing. That's one that would be attractive to me if I'm trying to win in my last chapter.
Absolutely.
Right?
That might be the most attractive job of them all.
Bingo.
If that
Bingo.
opens. All right.
So that's the only one that I've found in this group that you go. And Indianapolis, should they actually move on, there's a lot of stuff to like there in theory as well. Like there's not a lot of these jobs. San Francisco is a major one, but the odds of them moving on for Purdy seems small, just like it also seems insane that they would pay him like $270 million. Johnny keeps a lot of you guys are saying Seattle. If that's the case, to your point, that's Geno Smith then becomes available, and Geno Smith is an upgrade for the Titans.
No, they're not moving on. He's got one more year for sure.
Right.
Daniel Jones, Sam's asked about. Daniel Jones is going to be free, but I picture Daniel Jones going the like Zach Wilson route. He'll disappear for a year on somebody's bench. Ideally, get a catch your breath year, be with a good coordinator, good offensive head coach, learn, and then in a year emerge as maybe an option for somebody.
And honestly, I don't know what Cleveland can do with the Watson contract. Like, I mean, that's the other thing, it being fully guaranteed. Like, I don't know what they do with that. But Cleveland is the one that I circle and I go, potential opening at quarterback, good coach, good roster around him, recently successful, and a chance to be good and win in your last chapter. I don't know any of these other places have that. If the Rams were to move on from Stafford, the Rams would obviously be a glaring neon sign.
They would do it with somebody in mind, clearly. Right. And Sam points out, I just cut or traded Rodgers. I think Rodgers is absolutely poisonous. I wouldn't want the Titans to have anything to do with him. He wants way too much control, way too much say, controls the fates of GMs, coaches, coordinators, receivers, all of that. I think the league, quite frankly, should be done with him. But I don't know that he's attractive to but a very small segment of the population. I would hope the Titans wouldn't be one. I mean, can you picture Rand Carthon kowtowing to Aaron Rodgers? I mean,
dude, I want to cover that. That's all I care about.
You're I think like Andrew Rising over there who like relishes such
sadomasochism.
I just think of what a headache it would be to cover press conferences about ayahuasca and trying to calculate if he's lying or not. That's difficult non-football stuff.
What's interesting about Rodgers is in the very Brady-esque, like going back home kind of deal. If they move on from Purdy, Rodgers in San Francisco would be the ultimate sort of like, this is where I'm going to end my career out back home with Shanahan and whatever. So here's the only other thing about this. The last point we'll make here, and we'll send you guys off on your merry holiday, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah celebration. And that is, if Rand Carthon, Chad Brinker, Amy Adams-Strunk, and Brian Callahan all are fully bought into each other, and they absolutely have not waffled through a terrible season where they get to the point where they are now, if no one has changed their opinion on Brian Callahan being definitively the answer and an offensive guy who's been in the league long enough to be good enough to get out of all this stuff, that is where I could be convinced by Brian Callahan. If he walks into my office and I'm Rand and I'm Chad and he goes, this is our guy, we're drafting him. That's the only other angle to this, is where Brian, you believe in him so much and you're convinced on him so much that he steps into your office and says, look, we know what we're doing with Will Levis. He's out. We know Mason's walking. I don't think it's smart for us to go spend a bunch of money on this, and this. But you know who I believe in? This guy. And maybe it's not Sanders. Maybe it's somebody else. But if they were to say that, and that's the conversation behind closed doors, that could be the only other real angle that makes sense here. And
I kind of like that concept if he has that guy. But you know when he doesn't have that guy? January 6th. If they're having meetings on January 6th after this game is on the 4th or the 5th against Houston, I sure as hell hope he doesn't have that guy, because there's no way he's had time to scout college quarterbacks with all that he's been buried under. So
stop making smart and rational points, PK.
Yeah. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. See all the messages. We appreciate all you guys.
For sure.
And this has been a fun thing to be a part of. Not that we're near the end or it's a funeral or anything like that, but it's a Titans funeral.
Well, I would be interested, because you know how human beings get in these meetings, right? Where there's everybody's a sales rep about something. I could see Brian Callahan just walking in being like, this is the guy we have to go get. You hear stories about that after the fact all the time, right? about how a coach went to a GM and said, this is the guy we got to go get. And they went up and they got him, or they went back and they got him. Or, Andy Reid was like, we're going to get Mahomes, right? Like they go get Mahomes. You hear stories about that stuff all the time. And so that's the only other option that makes sense. Otherwise, unsure.
How doesn't it go like this? Look, I know they got kumbaya going on over there, but if she has a meeting with Brian on the 6th, the 7th, whatever, and says what happened, he's got to say, I had no players.
I mean, right? I agree.
And if she goes in the rain and say what happened, he goes, I endorsed the wrong coach. And all of a sudden, kumbaya turns into the same exact thing that she didn't want from before, where there's finger pointing. It's inevitable when things go to shit.
Yeah. Look, we like to glorify like politicians and actors and musicians and athletes, but like they're all people. I hate to break it to you. They're all people, and they're all self-interested, just like everybody else in the world. So
Sam said they're both going to pin it on QB, but if she wants to push it to the next level, there's more to it. Well, you both told me the QB was going to be good enough. So whose fault is it there? Now we go next chapter. I don't know.
The coach has always had the get out of jail free card since the moment he was hired. The coach has. The GM does not. Unless he can go to Amy and say, I can't believe Mike made me draft him. which we don't think is true. You've reported that. We don't think that's true. So we shall see. All right. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, the happy Kwanzaa, the Festivus for the rest of us, the airing of grievances, and the feats of strength as well. PaulKuharsky.com is the website. Go check them out. Sinkers Beverages for all your holiday drink needs, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue for when you need to get out of the house and stop talking politics with your in-laws. For Paul, I am Braden. Have a great holiday, everybody. Nick and I are back on Thursday, and then Paul and I are back after the holiday weekend on Monday. Have a great one, everybody. Merry Christmas. Peace and love. Chin up, Titans fans. It's going to be okay. Talk to you later.